A lot of these athletes are doing the keto diet because they know that it also helps for recovery.
The best way to think about this is, it doesn't have to be the exact same diet for each person, but every person could likely benefit from this. From the top performers, people who want to optimize, people who are already feeling healthy but want to feel even better, this is really helpful. The person who is suffering with both diabetes and severe bipolar disorder or treatment-resistant depression can also benefit from this.
This is actually what I would consider to be the best brain diet.
Welcome to the Brain Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Porter. Please join us on our mission to better a billion brains. Enjoy the episode and remember to share it with your family and friends.
Welcome, Brain Tap Nation. This is Dr. Patrick Porter. I'm your host of the Brain Fitness Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, something that is kind of, for me, out of the realm of possibility. We have a psychiatrist doing work with metabolic syndrome and things like that with the brain. We're going to learn a great deal from Dr. Bernstein. And what I want you to do, first of all, because not a lot of people know your journey and how you got started in this, because it seems a little bit off the trail for most people in neurophysiology and things like that. So tell us a little bit about what got you motivated in this field.
Yeah, well, I was a pretty traditional psychiatrist, worked on an inpatient unit, worked in this intensive outpatient program, have a private practice doing medications and psychotherapy. About 8.5 years ago, two of our three sons got very sick with autoimmune encephalitis. Picture, people may have heard the diagnosis pandas or PANS. Well, that's what happened to them. So pretty much overnight, they were 12 and 14 at the time, went from being happy, well-adjusted to being completely unable to function, very severe OCD, dysregulation, lots of physical symptoms as well. And that really opened my eyes because my own field of psychiatry and my wife's field of psychology really couldn't help them at all. So it really made me question what I was doing. And through that journey, learned so much about biology and the connection between the mind and the body. And out of that process, I sort of, retooled kind of how I do things in my field.
That's great. Well, I saw that you went to Columbia University in New York. This is a pretty prestigious school,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that you were top of your class. Everything's going great. And did you have any thought about this when you were doing it, or just what happened to your family? It became a personal mission and you decided to, kind of go off the beaten path? Because I'm sure they didn't teach you this at Columbia, so they might be using it now because there's a lot of emerging new technologies. But tell me, how did your thinking go from traditional training? Because
Yeah,
I know a lot of psychiatrists, they just diagnose and actually give out pills. And then,
that's right.
you're doing a little bit different.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't learn any of this in my training. I went to undergrad at Columbia and I was at University of Pennsylvania for medical school, didn't learn anything about nutrition there. And then I did residency at Mass General in McLean at part of Harvard, didn't learn anything about nutrition or much about metabolism there as well. Interestingly enough, I was at a Grand Rounds lecture at McLean and heard a speaker named Dr. Chris Palmer, who was talking about reversing treatment-resistant schizophrenia with a ketogenic diet. And I think there were maybe, 200 people in the room. I might have been the only one who actually believed what he was saying. And I think all the colleagues said, oh, that sounds interesting, and sort of, walked out of the room and didn't think about it again. But at that point, my kids were already sick. So I was really paying attention. And I really, it really changed my thinking that a diet could be so powerful to reverse schizophrenia that hadn't been treatable by the strongest medications that we have. And since I've learned about this, and done it myself now for years, I can attest that it is more powerful for some of these severe mental health conditions than any medication that I can prescribe.
Yeah, we always say, one of my tenants, they'll hear me say, you cannot think a bad diet,
That's right.
and most people have a toxic diet, right? They're feeding their body if they're out there on the farm working, but they're not feeding their brain. We need to feed our brain.
That's
So
right.
when did you find the connection between the keto diet and brain function? Because this is something, of course, in the biohacking world, they're all talking about it. They see it in their Oura rings and their Whoop watches and, all these things. But,
Right.
what was the epiphany for you that said, hey, we can get the brain functioning right through diet, and it changes a lot of things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when I heard that lecture, and Dr. Palmer had mentioned it during that lecture, but it made me go back and research this as well, which is that there's over 100-year history using ketogenic diets to reverse another severe brain condition, epilepsy. And the data is very, very strong. It works even when medications don't work. And with kids who respond well to the diet, they can even do the diet for a few years, come off all their medication, and then they don't even have to be on the diet anymore. They've literally healed their brain through this diet, which we can't say about any medication option, that I prescribe or that neurologists prescribe. It doesn't heal the brain. It just treats symptoms. So
Yeah,
we're talking about root cause healing here, which is incredibly exciting. And it's just something that doesn't get talked about in regular medicine at all, as you probably know.
yeah.
So that really turned me on. I was like, okay, I got to understand the mechanisms, how this works, how safe is it, what mental health conditions it could work for. And, it's evolved since then, over a course of about 5 years.
Yeah. And I want to be clear to the listeners that you don't have to have these psychiatric problems to do the ketogenic diet. It's awesome. And one of the things that we're facing in America and the world, because when I travel the world, wherever the fast food places go, you see people getting fatter and, getting overweight, and they're not feeding their brain. They're feeding, so they have all this adipose tissue, all this energy stored in their body. They're not tapping into it. And they're not really getting to that second phase of digestion where you start to build ketones and get the brain needs that food, right? So tell me about how this intersects with metabolism, because a lot of people out there are still struggling with their weight. This could be one of the big things for that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the ketogenic diet, I kind of think of it almost like a Swiss Army knife. It does everything that we need it to do for our bodies. It's incredible. It can reverse type 2 diabetes. It's very good for losing weight. For people out there who are overweight or obese, this diet can be extremely helpful in terms of losing that weight, reversing that prediabetes or diabetes. Incredibly good for the brain. And it's, as you're right to say, it's not just for severe mental health. Even people who are just having a little trouble with their memory or attention or focus, it's supercharged my ability to work. I've been doing it for a little over 5 years, and I could never produce what I could produce then. Now, it's amazing how much I feel like I've lost. I've reversed my age by 20 years in terms of my brain health by doing this. So yeah, it's very good for optimization as well. So you asked sort of how does it work? There's multiple mechanisms. I can just name a few, and we can go into some in more detail if you want, but it's an alternative or additional source of fuel for the brain. So the brain, can be bathed in glucose, but literally starving for energy because the brain becomes insulin resistant. It's a boost to the health of the mitochondria, which are our energy factories in our cells. And the brain is the most energy intensive organ in the body. But in addition, the mitochondria do a lot more than just produce energy. We've now know they're doing many other things. It reduces neural inflammation. It reduces oxidative stress in the brain. It changes the GABA to glutamate ratio, which is very helpful. It has mechanisms through the microbiome gut-brain axis. And finally, we know it increases BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is sort of like, miracle grow for our neurons, getting them to connect more with each other. So all those mechanisms are well studied by neuroscientists because, as we said, we've known this has worked in epilepsy for many decades. So the neuroscientists have been studying this. This is hard science. There's more science behind this, is what I discovered, than the science behind any of these medications that I had been prescribing for so many years. And I still do prescribe, from time to time.
Yeah. Usually they're only short term. They're supposed to be short term. Then you get your body working, and then you don't need the medicines anymore. But
that's right.
People get dependent upon the medicines, right? Now, one of the things that I know the ketogenic diet does, and you talk about the circadian rhythm in biology and all of these things, 2/3 of the world isn't sleeping. And I think it's their diet, and everybody wants to come up with a sleep protocol before they go to sleep. And you can do all those things. Of course, that's good. But if you just ate, a high sugar diet in, full of bad fats and, seed oils and all these things, it's going to cause problems. So tell us a little bit about how you found the connection with the circadian rhythm, and tell us a little bit about what that is. I talk about it sometimes, but it'd be great to hear your perspective.
Yeah, well, the circadian rhythm, we have a master clock in the center of our brain. It sits right on top of our optic nerves. And it's mostly there because it's sampling the light that's coming in through our eyes. And so we evolved outdoors, and we were getting those light signals all day long. And then it would get dark and the light would stop. And then our body would know it's time to sleep and rest. And we would make melatonin. People think of melatonin as a sleep hormone, which it does help us transition to sleep, but it does many more things about detoxifying, you know,
Yeah, it's in every cell of the body. I mean, it's
that's
not
right.
just in the brain. People think I'm going to take this melatonin supplement, but your body produces thousands of dollars of it just by eating correctly and moving and breathing and doing different.
And getting the right light and avoiding light at the wrong times.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. It's very sensitive to light. That's probably the most powerful signal for our circadian clock. We also know that if people's circadian rhythms are off, like night shift workers, they're getting the wrong signals at the wrong times, they get many more diseases. They die at much younger ages, heart disease, cancer, strokes, etc. So we know how powerful this is. It's very powerful for optimal brain function as well, just like it is for the rest of the body. And so that's very connected. If we want our mitochondria to work correctly, we want everything in our brain to work correctly, we have to tell the brain what time it is through the correct light signals. And that's really important.
Yeah, that's great. I know that I love talking to people like you that are actually in the field. A lot of people, they discover something like this, they write a book, and next thing you know, they're on the trail for 10 years. They don't have any new research, they're not really working with people. So
Right.
you have a program called Accord, right? So tell us a little bit about how you created that and what are you seeing in the field when you're working with these patients, and what's their turnaround time, and maybe give some tips to the listeners on how they can start learning a little bit from you. We're gonna have all your contact information below, so don't worry, guys. We're gonna make sure you stay in touch with the doc here. But tell us a little bit about what you're seeing, and tell us a little bit about your program.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I started doing this with individual outpatients. And as you said, I am a full-time clinician. I still see patients. That's what I do all day, all week. Um, I started doing this, and many people started doing it at home, getting amazing results. I was blown away by how powerful it was. But there are many people that I would start talking to them and teaching them how to do it. And it was really hard. It's a lot of lifestyle changes to make to really do this well. And people would get overwhelmed. They're already struggling with their mental health condition, a physical health condition. They're trying to make ends meet. It's tough. So I decided that some people really can benefit from an immersion in this. And that's what Accord is. So it's a house outside of Boston. People come from all over the country, actually from other countries as well, because there's really nothing else like this. They come in and we put them on a well-formulated ketogenic diet. We're doing lots of measurements and assessments, lab work, ketone levels, continuous glucose monitor, body composition. We have a wonderful dietitian who's helping formulate those meals, and an incredible chef. So the food is absolutely delicious. People won't miss what they were eating at home. And then we also get them exercising with a personal trainer. We have them engaging in some kind of mind-body practice of some kind, whatever we can get them to do, because that's also very important part of this. And it can be the missing piece, even when you're doing everything else right. If you're not, working on your vagal tone and parasympathetic tone, some of this isn't. You're not going to get the optimal results. And then circadian rhythm alignment, as we said, like getting light at the right times. People stay for anywhere between 4 and 12 weeks, and we are seeing absolutely incredible results. People come in, they're on multiple medications. They've had to, sometimes stop working or never got off, to be able to work. And we're turning those situations around with that program. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah. What are you seeing when you're monitoring glucose? What are you seeing is like the average blood sugar level when people start the program?
Well, so, by the time we get that CGM on them, they're already on their first day of eating keto. So we don't see it all that up and down. Although, sometimes we have seen some spikes in glucose. It can happen if someone cheats. It's not a locked program. People can go out in the community. Sometimes they'll eat something they shouldn't eat and their glucose will spike up to 160, 170. On a keto diet, that never happens. The glucose stays between usually somewhere around 55 and 100. Never varies between that amount on a ketogenic diet.
Tell us what happens when when the blood sugar's at that level. What's happening in the body? What's the mechanisms that are going on there?
When it's low or when it's high?
When it's low. We know it is when it's high, they're storing fat.
Yeah.
So
they're storing fat, but also they're undergoing tons of oxidative stress in their brain. Whenever the glucose goes high, there's immediately oxidative stress in the brain that causes problems. And then their glucose will shoot down low, and then they're going to have mood fluctuations from that. So, when it's too high, there's mood fluctuations. When it's too low, they get very anxious. So that, glucose roller coaster is what, almost everyone is on the standard American diet. Instead, when it's nice and low and steady, we're still using glucose for fuel, but we're also using fatty acids and ketones for fuel. So that's when our body's going to start, using fatty acids. Our liver's going to start chopping up some of those fatty acids into these little ketone molecules that can cross into the brain. And the brain absolutely loves those ketone molecules as fuel and as a signaling molecule for the mitochondria. And so that's when the healing starts taking place.
Yeah, we're really big on mitochondria, of course,
Yeah.
using BrainTap because we use light to stimulate that. And
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that mechanism. 'Cause you said mitochondria does a lot more than just produce energy. It's
Yeah.
actually sending codes to the body. So tell us a little bit about what's your perspective on that.
Yeah, the new research is showing that mitochondria are this cooperative colony inside each cell. And in fact, they even talk to the mitochondria in other cells. It's incredible. The more we learn, it's mind-boggling. So the mitochondria are involved in the first step of hormone synthesis. They're involved in the release of neurotransmitters at the end of a neuron. They're involved in the transcription of DNA in the nucleus of the cell. So they're actually controlling what the cell's going to do. They're almost like a master controller of our cells. Absolutely, incredible amount of different things. So, we learned in biology in high school that they're energy factors, and they certainly are. But
Yeah.
they're also, they're sending out signals regarding inflammation as well. So mitochondria are involved in starting inflammation and then actually resolving inflammation. So if the mitochondria don't feel safe, there's this idea of this cell danger response. They won't allow the rest of the body to resolve inflammation because they're going to keep sending out these signals of extracellular ATP to, prevent the resolution of inflammation. And finally, mitochondria are involved in apoptosis, which some people may know as programmed cell death. The mitochondria actually can decide this cell isn't working anymore and it needs to die. And the mitochondria are involved in that. So they do so many things beyond just producing energy.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about when these people come in, do they stay for a week, a month? And then what kind of results are you seeing over time?
So the minimum is 4 weeks, and people can stay up to 12 weeks at our program. We make it a minimum of 4 because we think people need that amount of time to really feel the benefits, start feeling the benefits of this, and to really change their habits and have a chance of continuing all of these things when they get home. Some people want to stay longer, and so some people do. And like I said, we're having absolutely incredible results. Some people come in, like I said, on 4, 5, 6 different psychiatric medications. We're able to reduce some of those, sometimes get them off some of those. Their mood symptoms, their symptoms of their mental health, whether it be OCD or psychosis or mood, all are improving. And we're seeing, if people go to our website, they can see some of the results that we have there posted of our early set of patients that came through. And then metabolic improvements. So improvements in their lab work, improvements in their body composition. People feel more energetic, more vital, better attention and focus. I mean, all of this happens almost universally with this program.
Yeah. And you talked earlier about GABA and the adjutant that kind of blocks it. I know GABA is a precursor to DMT. So people have these kind of euphoric feelings and, this God molecule that's in the body. So tell us a little bit about what's so important about these neurotransmitters and what are you seeing is activating most? We're big on ketogenic diet. We have a whole program at BrainTap actually in the
Amazing.
app that works with it. But I don't teach it like you do. I don't have people come and stay with me and
Yeah.
have the experience, but we have a lot of users that are on the keto diet because it's a big deal. And when you start when you're in metabolic lock, like you said, you're basically you've eaten, but your food gets stored, all the energy gets stored, and then you have this low sugar, and some people are eating their way to malnutrition.
That's
So
right.
tell us a little bit of what's going on there.
Yeah, well, it has all that has to do with insulin, actually.
Okay.
So, when people have a high insulin all the time from the diet that we've been told to eat, which is this high carbohydrate diet, which causes our body to produce insulin. Insulin prevents the breakdown of fat to be used for energy. It's the storage molecule. We're going to store all the energy as fat, and so people can literally be walking around with a year's worth of energy on their body, but literally have no energy to do anything. They can't get themselves moving. They don't feel any energy because they can't access any of it because their insulin is high all the time. So the ketogenic diet is designed to keep insulin extremely low so we can access that energy that we're walking around storing at any point. That's what we call metabolic flexibility. Super important.
Yeah.
Back to what you were asking about GABA, though. GABA is, very important neurotransmitter. It's kind of what slows everything down. We think of these neurotransmitters that psychiatrists are talking about all the time: serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. They're important, but they're only in small areas of the brain. Whereas GABA and glutamate are everywhere. They're all over the brain. And GABA is sort of like the brakes, and glutamate is like the accelerator. And most of us are walking around with way too much glutamate and not enough GABA. And that's why everyone's feeling stressed and anxious all the time. GABA is the thing that allows us to feel calm. It's actually partly how alcohol works, how some of these medications like benzodiazepines work. I'm not advocating people use those, but people get a sense of that those things are calming, and they quell anxiety, and they help people settle down for sleep. Well, we can make our own GABA, and this diet is known to increase levels of GABA in the brain and lower levels of glutamate in the brain, which in the end is universally effective for all of these mental health conditions. And we don't have to, these other neurotransmitters are probably a little bit downstream. Like the core thing we need to fix is mitochondria, fuel, energy, GABA and glutamate. When we fix those, it sounds a little funny. I'm saying it works on all these different mental health conditions, but in the reality, that's what we're seeing in the data. There's a bunch of studies coming out showing all these different mental health conditions where this is working.
Yeah. I always tell people we have an energy problem. It's an energy equation. If you're not getting energy to the cells, they can't function. They can't send signals. They can't process. They can't do their job. It'd be like asking a shift worker that worked the double shift, and then you're saying, hey, we need you to stay awake and work some more. You're not going to get the best quality. So
That's right.
tell us, most people don't realize that insulin's a fat storage hormone too. So what that means is it's going to start storing. It's just going to go. It doesn't discern. It just says we need to store this fat,
That's
and
right.
then it puts it in the adipose tissue, and then you're locked out of it. And it's not just happening in your gut, because we have a gut biome and we have a brain biome,
That's
and
right.
they usually match. So what are you finding are the challenges to somebody being on this keto diet? What do you think the biggest things you have to work with them or coach them through to get them to stay on that diet?
Well, I think for a lot of people, the very idea that you're going to give up, and just to say what the diet is for people who don't know, very high amount of fat in the diet, moderate protein. It's not a high protein diet, and it's a very low carbohydrate diet. So that means people need to avoid all these foods that are very comforting and that people are used to using for comfort, sugar, processed flours, rice, pasta, pizza, all these things are, you can make ketogenic versions of these things, but the standard version of these things are very high in carbohydrates. It's what's causing our metabolic crisis in our country, and probably our mental health crisis in this country as well.
Yeah.
So the challenge people have is they have to really rethink how they're going to fuel themselves. Food is not just about comfort anymore. It's about creating optimal health. That's a big transition for people to make. And we from a very young age, we're all sort of acculturated to this idea that we do something good. What do you give a kid when they do something good? You give them a cookie, or you give them a lollipop. We all think that way. I've worked hard today. I deserve my my cookies when I get home, or my bowl of ice cream when I get home.
Yeah.
And so people need to really rethink that food is not about rewards and comfort. It needs to be about creating optimal health, which is really what it can do if we do it right.
Right. When Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine,
That's right.
you need to think. I always tell people every meal you have a chance to turn your body into a fat burning machine or a fat storage machine.
That's right.
So you can, if you did bad at a meal, don't beat yourself up. Just you consistently string together days, and then pretty soon you don't want your taste buds are kind of perverted, really, because of all this sugar and food. And once you get off it for a while, you go back and you find out it's not as good as you thought it was.
That's right.
Because the feeling, nothing feels as good as healthy, feels. No food tastes as good as being healthy feels. So when you think about that, so tell us a little bit about what other benefits have you found people telling you about with the keto diet?
Yeah, well, I mean, people often do, sleep much better because of that increase in GABA, but, energy to go exercise too. A lot of people say, I don't like to exercise, and then all of a sudden they're doing a ketogenic diet. A couple months later, they come back and tell me about the workouts that they're doing. Like, wow, one young man hadn't worked out for years, and he was on one of these very heavy psychiatric regimens. He was sleeping all the time. Through this program, we were able to lower his medication. He's now doing CrossFit. He's out there doing the hardest workouts you could imagine, And, he wasn't doing any of that for years. So that's a huge benefit. And then it's really that cognitive benefit. People say, all of a sudden, my brain fog's gone. I can think clearly. I can focus. I couldn't sit down and read. Now I can sit down and just, do whatever I need to do. I can focus on whatever I need to focus on and get it done. Um, all that stuff's pretty universal. Once,
Yeah.
but it takes a little time. This is not like you don't get that all in a couple of weeks. So I also want to caution people, I tried keto and I didn't feel well for a couple of weeks and I stopped. Well, you didn't really try it. You got to be in ketosis. You got to measure ketones, make sure you're in ketosis, and you got to stay there for usually a couple of months to really start getting the benefits. But then the longer you stay in it, the more benefits you get over time. But the body takes a little time to adapt and really optimize itself. It's not going to reverse all of these metabolic problems and fix the mitochondria all in a couple of weeks. It takes a little longer than that.
Yeah. I think it's important that the listeners know that they're not wrong or broken. They're just feeding. It'd be like putting bad gas in your car and it's not
That's
working
right.
right. They're going to
That's
say,
right.
don't put that gas in it. Let's put this gas in it. I mean, if you have a Lamborghini, you're not going to put regular gas in it. You're going to put the high performing fuel in. So you need to think of your body as a high performing machine. Most people don't have energy to sleep. That's what I tell people. They don't need energy in the form of a candy bar or soda or something like that. They need these ketones. And if you have it,
Right.
your body can, because you do more neurological activity while you're sleeping than when you're awake.
That's
So,
right.
and so what are you finding? Like you're saying more than 2 weeks? Because I know, like even the beginning of the year, they have Quitter's Day, right? The second Friday of January, they call it
That's
Quitter's
right.
Day. 'Cause everybody quits their New Year's resolutions on that day,
That's right.
and they go, well, I'll do that next year. But then they got a whole year of damage again. And then,
That's
so
right.
I always talk about Monday morning motivation. If we could bottle that and sell it, we'd be millionaires, right? Everybody has this motivation. So how do you keep them motivated when they're going through the crisis?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that helps is, at the program, we actually measure a lot of stuff. So we are measuring these biomarkers. People love to see their ketone levels go up and keep them up, and look at their continuous glucose curves and see those look beautiful and flat. But we're also measuring mental health rating scales, PHQ-9 and GAD-7s, and a couple of functional rating scales as well. And sometimes people say, I'm not sure if I'm feeling better or not. And we say, well, let's compare your scales from this week, from the first week, and they're shocked. They actually, couldn't even tell, but they're the ones answering those questions on those scales, and they're
Right.
giving very different answers a few weeks in than they were in the beginning. And so that really helps keep motivation up, because people say, oh, wow, look at this. Like, I'm seeing all these numbers improving that are, objective numbers, and my own subjective report numbers are all getting better. That really helps a lot. Plus, it's really helpful to have, we have a really great social worker at the program who's really good in keeping people motivated. I'm there trying to keep people motivated. Everyone's learning why it works and how it works. The knowledge can be really helpful too. It's really fun to learn new things. And then people are in ketosis, so they start actually being able to learn, when maybe in the beginning it was hard to pay attention and focus on all the science, but they start, being able to focus on it. So those are all some really helpful things. The other thing that's really motivating too is people start losing some of their waistline. If their waist circumference starts shrinking, people really like that.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah.
we're talking to Dr. Mac Bernstein. He's the Cord's chief executive officer, and he's not just somebody who wrote a book or teaches other people. He's actually in the field doing it. So do you teach other doctors this? Because this seems like, I just was at a psychiatric conference, and psychologists were there as well in San Diego. And, we brought them Brain Tap, and it was like we brought in a foreign invader. They think we're going to take over their job. I said, there's too many people with mental health problems for anybody, right? There's not enough. So if you can teach them to add diet, some kind of diet strategies, because so many people overlook that. They think, oh, we can just put whatever we want in our body. What are you finding your profession is, how they accepting it, and how are you doing out there in the field? And do you train other doctors to do this?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of resistance in my field. And, I think, people need something to motivate them to make this kind of big change, whether it be the person who's going to do it or the doctor who's going to start adopting it. For me, I had a big motivating factor to start learning new things with my kids getting sick. So I understand, it's hard to change what you're doing when you've been doing that. You learned something, you went to school for, 4 years in undergrad and 4 years in medical school and 4 years of residency. That's a lot of training and learning. And you think you know a lot. As it turns out, the body's way more complicated than what we learned in any of that training. But it's hard to be open-minded when you've been doing it for so many years and someone's coming in and saying, you know, a diet can do what, you know, your prescription pad, more than what your prescription pad can do. That's a hard message to take, or I guess a hard pill to swallow, if I could use the pun. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's great because I tell people you're the smartest you'll ever be when you were born. You were totally
Yeah.
wired, and then
Yeah.
you unwire. And the
That's right.
problem is it takes a lot of energy to think differently.
yeah,
You
it
know,
does.
you need to have a crisis maybe or a breakdown. I said, but you don't have to have a breakdown to have a breakthrough. You can learn from other people and do that. So,
Yeah.
you know, when you're thinking about it, so congratulations. I mean, that's what I said. We don't see this a lot. You know,
Yeah.
I went to, you know, when I don't use very much of what I learned in school. I was a Christian psychologist, so I was working for churches, you know, and so that's not what I do now. So,
Right.
but we weren't getting results either. You
Right.
know, just talking to somebody isn't getting results. You got to get them to take action.
Yeah.
So when they leave, what kind of action steps do you give them to stay on the program?
Yeah, I mean, we're start thinking about the day they're going to leave from the first day they arrive. So everything is designed to create sustainable practices for people. We're constantly talking to them about what's it going to be like when you get home? Who's going to be cooking the food? Where are you going to be eating? We start taking people to the grocery store. Our chef is constantly having people cook in the kitchen. So many people don't know how to cook. It's very hard to do this well if you can't cook for yourself. We're also taking people to restaurants and teaching them how to order a healthy enough, ketogenic enough meal at any restaurant, which can be done, but you really need to know what you're doing. Sometimes you might need to talk to the staff and ask for something a little special or additional. But we're teaching people how to do all those things. And we're really building all those habits from the beginning. And then we do have a coach that can work around the country. So no matter where anyone goes back to, the coach can work with them and keep them on track as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
When do you find, like, when somebody gets on this diet and the keto diet and they start feeling good, looking good, doing their things, when does it seem like it becomes a part of their personality? Because that's part of the makeup, right? Because they get up and they boot up the old system and
Yeah.
they're fighting against it. Like I did a lot with addiction therapy. You know, when you're dealing with somebody with alcohol or drug addiction, they have that imposter syndrome when they're not doing the drug. And
Right.
most people don't think of food as a drug, but it is. It's
Yeah.
changing your physiology, your psychology, and all these things. So when do you find that there's that? Is there a common, like, timing that you see, or?
I think it can be different for different people. Some people, I think, adopt into this very quickly and they say, I'm never going back after just, a couple of months. I think for other people, they start feeling better in a couple of months, but they haven't done what you're describing, which is really making it a part of the core of who they are. Sometimes for many of them, it could take, 6 to 9 or even 12 months to like really get to that point where it's like, this is just who I am now. I don't, someone offers me a delicious brownie and I don't even want it. Or if I want it, I know I don't want to feel the way I'm going to feel after I eat it. So I'm not going to take it. That can take a while. That it can. Yeah. To be honest. Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of resources you share with people. So where do you recommend people go to learn more from you or about this program or about ketogenic diets?
Yeah. So about my program, we have a great website called accordmh.com, ACCORDMH.com. We have a whole section there with blogs that we write and some videos. There's a video that I did of a lecture, which goes much more into the science about all this, if someone's really interested in that, and links to a bunch of other resources as well. There are a couple of books that I would recommend if people really want to dig really deep into this. One is called Brain Energy by Chris Palmer, the doctor who I talked about, who I learned about this first from. And the other one is called Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind by Dr. Georgia Ede, spelled EDE. Those are both excellent books. For clinicians who want to get trained, Dr. Ede also offers a training program for clinicians of all kinds. So whether they be, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, health coaches, anyone can take our training program. And it really allows people to feel like they can start offering this to other people as well.
That's awesome.
So that's a great place. Yeah.
So would you say the first step is to get educated? My dad, I was very lucky. My dad was an alcoholic. He got off of that through some relaxation technique, changing our diet. Really, that's what changed our whole family. My mom went to a nutritionist. We got off sugars and dyes and flour. We didn't do the keto diet specifically, but you couldn't find sugar. My son, he always complained because he goes over to his friend's house, of course, gets crazy,
Right.
but at our house, there was no sugar. There was no white flour, there was no dyes, and because it helped us. We were all spazzes, so if you're a parent out there and your kid's acting up, it might not be their brain as far as psychiatry goes. It could be their diet. And I always tell
Absolutely.
people, just go to a birthday party. The kids are all acting really nice and friendly. You break out the cake and the Kool-Aid. Next thing you know, they're scratching each other, fighting, and and they go, "Oh, that's just Jimmy or
Right.
Sally." No, it's not. They turn into someone else. When they have this diet. So, what are you finding as far as teaching parents? Because this diet, a modified version of this diet anyway, could be given to kids and it would help
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, I mean, the ketogenic diet, got most popular for kids with epilepsy. It's also really effective for kids with autism spectrum disorders too. So, the full version of a ketogenic diet can be given to kids. But if it's not, that level, of a brain situation, but more just some behavioral things, maybe some, they may have gotten an ADHD diagnosis and their doctor's talking about putting them on a stimulant. This is definitely an option for a
Yeah.
kid. It doesn't need to be high levels of ketones necessarily, but just remove, as you said, clean up the diet, remove the sugar, the flour, the starchy vegetables. Just a low carbohydrate, whole foods diet can do wonders for a kid's mental health. The
Yeah.
other thing I would add is that there's some really interesting research about metabolic issues in childhood leading to severe psychiatric conditions in adulthood. That the kids with the highest levels of insulin at a certain age and the kids who gain the most weight during um, adolescence and puberty are at 3 to 5 times greater risk of major mental illness, things like, severe depression and schizophrenia, just from metabolic problems. So if you're noticing that your kid is also, not moving around enough and gaining weight, this is setting them up for a severe brain condition later on in life. This is, it's not as simple as just, I mean, I know people don't have time, it's like,
Yeah.
your time is the most precious resource, and convenient food is not going to be healthy like this. It does take some more time, but it's really worth it. I mean, we're talking about, our health. This is the most, precious and valuable thing we have. Yeah,
Yeah. One thing you talked about was fats, and I don't want the listeners to think you're talking about just any old fats, right?
that's
We're talking
right.
about omega-3s and omega-6s. So tell us a little bit about what the difference is and why the body wants these
Yeah,
omega-3s and 6s
yeah.
and how you get them. How do people in the keto diet get these fats?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So when we're eating a high fat diet, we have to really pay attention to the quality of the fat that we're eating. And so people break down fats in different ways. You're talking about omega-3s and omega-6s. The brain definitely needs high amounts of omega-3s. Very important. We also need omega-6s, but our standard diet in America has a hugely elevated ratio of omega-6 compared to omega-3. So mostly people should be focusing on getting more omega-3s in their diet. People also think about fats, versus in this other way of saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat. People may be afraid of saturated fat. We're all told to eat less saturated fat. That, the connection between saturated fat and heart disease has been debunked. Even the American Heart Association doesn't agree with that definition anymore. Saturated fat will potentially raise your LDL cholesterol. And LDL cholesterol has an association with heart disease, but there's many other factors in heart disease than just LDL cholesterol. So don't be so afraid of saturated fat. Our bodies need it. We need it to create hormones. We need it for brain structure. That's really important. Everyone sort of agrees on monounsaturated fats being healthy. So those are things like olive oil, avocados, avocado oil. There's a lot of monounsaturated fats in nuts and seeds. Everyone agrees those are great. And then polyunsaturated fats, are a little controversial because most of the sources of these polyunsaturated fats now are these refined seed oils. And we're eating way more of those than we used to. And there's a good argument to be made that those are really not good for us. They get oxidized in the bottle and they get oxidized in the fryers, and then they oxidize things throughout our body. So they're really not good for our health. But there are healthy polyunsaturated fats from a more natural source, something like, sesame seeds or tahini, which is ground up sesame seeds. There's a lot of polyunsaturated fats in that, and that can be very healthy as well and very ketogenic, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can be delicious.
Yeah.
Once you fix your taste buds, I always tell people appetite's in the mind, hunger's in the body, and your body really never gets hungry.
That's right.
but our brain takes over, and like you said, you see the brownie or the candy and things like that, and then this cascade of thoughts comes in, and you feel like you're missing out, or maybe you're suffering. This is something. It's not just a part-time thing. Your body needs to heal,
That's right.
and every day. I was saying there is no there. You're never going to graduate. You're going to have to eat every day. You're going to have to handle stress every day. You have to have a lifestyle that
That's right.
works to create health. So we're going to have all your information in the show notes. Everything's going to be there. They're going to learn more from you. But what if I forgot to ask you about ketogenic diet, or what if you want to reinforce for the listeners so they understand that this isn't a flash in the pan either. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of research, and
That's right.
in our field where we work with health optimization people and peak performers, a lot of these athletes are doing the keto diet because they know that it also helps for recovery.
That's right.
It helps your body recover. So tell us a little bit about maybe something I missed, or something that you want to reinforce.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best way to think about this is, it doesn't have to be the exact same diet for each person, but every person could likely benefit from this. As you're saying, from the top performers, people who want to optimize, people who are already feeling healthy but want to feel even better, this is really helpful. To the person who is suffering with both diabetes and severe bipolar disorder or treatment-resistant depression, can also benefit from this. This is because the reason is because we evolved to be in and out of ketosis. You know, we were, until agriculture came online, which was a mere, 10,000 years ago compared to our millions of years of evolutionary history. Our genes need this, our cells need this. And so that's, I think, the message. This is not some weird, trendy, thing you see on the internet. This is how we evolved. This is the fundamental way in which we've survived, actually, is through this mechanism of ketosis. It's a survival molecule. So people just need to, think of it that way, not as this, it's this thing that I saw on social media about losing weight, and, I'll probably do it for a couple weeks and stop. That's not what we're talking about here. This is actually a fundamental part of our health that we all should be thinking about. And even if not everyone needs to do necessarily a ketogenic diet all the time, but this is a way of healing our cells and healing our metabolism. And, if everyone's doing so well that they don't need to do it all the time, more power to them. But at least for me, once I started doing it, I don't ever want to stop. I feel better and better each month that I do it. Prior to the advent of agriculture, a mere 10,000 years ago, for the millions of years of our evolutionary history, we were in ketosis or in and out of ketosis almost the entire time. This is what allowed us to survive when there wasn't food. This is a survival and optimization and healing molecule that we can access anytime we want by eating a certain way. So it's an incredibly powerful insight into our evolutionary biology. It's not just a trend that you're seeing on the internet.
Right. And this is actually what I would consider to be the best brain diet. And what I look at is the end result of people doing it. They look healthy, they're happy, they're energized, they're doing things. I mean, the definition for most people of happiness is they're being able to do things. Happiness means happenings. If you just get home and crash on the couch and eat potato chips and drink sodas, and then you rinse and repeat the next day, and it's not worth living. I mean, so we have this energy in there. So congratulations for sharing this world and getting it into a part of the medical curriculum, because most of the time, we have the sick care industry, but we don't really have a healthcare industry. So it's nice to see that, you're part of the group that's, there's always the option. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world, which I have been sick in other places in the world. This is the best place to be. You're going to get the care you need. But most of them don't ever talk about how to live your life healthy.
Right.
Some of them actually say, well, you're not quite bad enough yet. Come back when you have this problem. So today's the day to start looking at your brain fitness. And this is a great diet for that. This is the best brain diet that I know of. You just look at the end result of people using it. I mean, I have a good friend that really runs like a keto program. He has 40 million followers on YouTube. This is a big deal. It's not a small deal. People are finding, hey, they use it. And even though you said like it might take a couple months to do it, you still are getting results right away because the energy will be there. Thank you, Dr. Bernstein, for being on the call, helping Brain Tap Nation understand what I've considered to be the top brain for feeding our brain, we need ketones anyway. You can't supplement ketones as much as people think. You can't just eat garbage and then take a bag of ketones like some multi-level marketing people do. We've got to eat that way. And every meal is a chance to get your brain to get the ketones it needs, get your body into fat burning, and get your metabolism up. So again, thank you and congratulations for finding it for yourself and for your family. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really been a pleasure to talk with you, and to, be introduced to your audience. So thanks so much. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Brain Tap Nation, it's up to you now. If you've heard anything of interest, which I'm blown away. There's a lot of things we learned here today that I think you can share with family members, friends, and coworkers. Go ahead and like this video, share it with your family members, your friends, your coworkers. Anyone you have that has a brain needs to learn about this, because this is how we feed the brain. When we could get away with a lot when we were kids, we're running around, we burn the sugar out by running around doing those things, but we're not doing those things anymore. So we need a brain diet. This is the brain diet. There is no other one that I know of that works as well. So go get the resources. We're going to have them in the show notes. Look into, if you need long-term solution or something like that, you can go see them at the house and stay there for 4 weeks and really learn it. I think that's a great program. I love that. They should have those at all the addiction centers too, because it's going to help them to think differently. So again, congratulations, Brain Tap Nation. Every week we bring you some news, cutting edge news about brain fitness. It could be about diet, could be about movement, could be about some kind of mental fitness that we do, whether it's mindfulness, brain tap, whatever we're doing. We're trying to keep you in touch with what is going to work. These are actionable steps. This isn't something you just read about. It's something you do in your life. So take action now. Let's do it. I'm on a mission to better a billion brains. And I want to thank you, Dr. Bernstein, for helping your brains, because everybody who's healthy actually is helping our social system, right? You become a better parent, you become a better worker, you achieve more, and it's just a side benefit, but you're going to feel those benefits. So again, Brain Tap Nation, like, share, and let's get this out to the world and share Dr. Bernstein's knowledge, and share it with your doctors, because a lot of doctors don't understand, and this is a fellow doctor talking about it, in the medical world, that we don't hear this a lot. This is a great breakthrough. I think we're going to hear more. We're seeing more and more now, because the trouble we have out there in the world is not easy. So diet is number one. We cannot think of bad diet. So let's get on the right diet. Let's move and breathe. Let's do some kind of mental fitness, brain fitness, whatever you're going to do to keep your mind straight, get your positive attitude, and meet life as a challenge, not as a threat. So again, thank you, Brain Tap Nation, for being here. And please help us share this with the world. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on our mission to better a billion brains. Follow at Dr. Patrick Porter on social media for updates, and remember to practice brain fitness every day.